Good morning. My name is Edwin, and I'm a director of the Innovation and Tech Ecosystem Group. Today we have Dr. Tan from AiDA with us. Maybe I just give the listeners a bit of context of who Dr. Tan is. He has a very illustrious career, and it's not very rare to have a Cambridge University grad with combined experience both in commercial companies like Motorola, Gotron, as well as in esteemed research places like AiDA and IMDA and all that. But today, he's not talking about that. Today, he's going to tell us about his journey in AiDA, which is one of the upcoming insurance tech disruptors that's blazing a trail in AI and insurance today. So, welcome, Dr. Tan.
Thank you. Well, the journey for AiDA is now 5 years, right? I started AiDA 5 years ago with a team of people. So today we will talk about that. But it's a very interesting and challenging journey. I'm maybe glad that you invited me to this podcast. I have a lot to share on the journey. People think it's technology, but it's actually technology, business, team, marketing, sales, the whole works, right? You're missing any part of that, you're in trouble.
What inspired you to take this journey? Because even before getting your feet wet, it looks quite daunting already, right?
Yes.
So I believe startup founders are a rare breed.
Right.
And it's the one thing to do something far greater and different that motivates them.
Right.
That's my hypothesis.
Sure, it is. I think you better have that fire in you because it's no joke. But actually, doing startup has always been in my DNA to some extent. I think you mentioned to the audience that I have maybe over 30 years experience. First 15 years of my life was in industry, right? And when I was in industry, I worked for very large organizations like Motorola, smaller ones, consulting in the UK, local SME, right? And then I have 15 years experience in government. I got beaten a bit up by doing too much of this startup. My wife said, you better go do something a little bit more stable. So I went in the government for 15 years, 10 years in IDA, where I became the CTO of IDA, right? And then 5 years in AiDA, right? And so that's my experience, a bit unusual. It straddles industry and government. Also, it straddles different countries. I worked in Malaysia, UK, Singapore, Hong Kong.
When you finally decided to take the leap into doing something for yourself, what was the transition like? And sometimes we expect your experience would always contribute, but sometimes they can also be, in a way, holding you up.
I understand. Wow, so many layers in that question. Right. First, why I start, right? I started because, in a sense, it's a tremendous opportunity. I'm at the age where if I don't do it, I won't do it anymore, right? I build up a lot of experience, build a network, and my kids are all big. I provided for the family, right? They have their education and so on. Now it's my turn to have fun, right? Okay. So actually that was a part of the reason. If I don't do it, I won't have a chance to do it. I want to do something in my mind, special, and show that we can do it. I wanted to build an analytics company that's not just good in Singapore, but global in a sense, right? And in terms of experience, I think I have to draw on quite a bit of the experience, right? Working in government, especially in AiDA. When I was in AiDA, I was the executive director of I2R, right? The largest IT research organization in Singapore. Actually, I went in with a view to, in a sense, transform the organization and make it more industry-centric. Actually, we were very successful in doing that, right? By bringing in both large multinationals, large local companies, and even SMEs, right? So having done so, I felt that I build certain networks, teams of people, and so on. And I found actually when I was in the research institute, there were about 5 or 6 different areas at least that's globally competitive. That if you use those technology, potentially you could build world-class companies. I could only pick one, and I picked analytics, which is one of our strongest.
In that transition from a relatively structured environment into becoming CEO, And I suppose at the point with hindsight and a bit of your self-awareness along the journey, how did that influence your perspective on building out the team in terms of the type of people you needed around you, and how did you go about actually doing that?
I think one should be aware that it is a very tough journey, right? I think like all news media, you look at news media, you think the news media shows you the highlights, right? So actually the startup story can look very sexy. Wow, in 3 years this guy making a unicorn and all that. What you see are called the outliers. Okay, the outliers. The actual journey for majority of people is a bit longer, a little bit harder. I knew it was a bit longer, a bit harder, but actually it's even longer and harder than I think, right? Because when you work in a very large organization, especially Singapore government organization, you have the backing, prestige, the infrastructure, and all that to support you, right? And you never have to worry about running out of money, right? When you are a startup, you raise some money, or we bootstrap ourselves first, right? But there's always pressure to get to a certain point, or you run out of money, right? So I would say it is a journey, a challenging journey, I would say. And everybody who plan to do it should be fully aware. Make sure you talk to people. Make sure you're very well prepared for it.
But in terms of getting the core team together, what were your views and perspectives, and in hindsight, would you have done anything different?
Of course, with hindsight, always easy to see things that are do different. I think one of the first things you need to do is ask yourself, what does your startup want to do? What will it be special for, right? And unfortunately, that also changes over time, right? When we started, I had a team of really top-rate, world-class analytics performers. These are people who win international competitions, build reputation, and so on. Very, very deep in analytics, right?
The Kaggle to commandos.
That's right. So we think that, okay, I'll go out and sell analytics capability, right? Then this concept of business model become extremely important. What is your startup going to do, and what's your business model? It's something you need to have a lot of think through, and what's appropriate for the market, right? So actually, we also discovered if you sell analytics capability, if you are in the US, probably it will work very well. But in our part of the world, not so well, because the companies are not so willing to pay for consulting service and that kind of thing. They want products, they want solutions, and so on, right?
So we are more a plug-and-play type of
plug
consumer.
and play, or I want a solution, right? Okay, your analytics is fantastic, but convert it into something that I can use. So analogy I give to you is this. Analytics is like the engine, right? You can have an engine that's really good, but you need the chassis, you need the wheels, the steering to go along with it, right? So and then you deliver a car, right? Companies want a solution to the car. They just don't want, no matter your engine so good, not enough, right? It must be a car for me, right? So if you are delivering a solution, then you need an end-to-end solution. You need the UI, you need the software, you need the other parts that put it together together with your super analytics engine. Right.
And this is compounded because each customer wants something slightly different as well, right?
Again, that goes back to business model. In fact, if anything, that's a most important message I want to give across. You have to be quite clear. What's your business model? Is your business model to sell analytics capability, which is a bit consulting? Or is your model to sell a solution, but even customized to your customer? A lot of touch and a lot of, or I'm going to sell one thing. Right, this one thing you use it. This is how I'm going to offer it to everybody. Right. And how you build a solution depends on what's your customer base. The difficulty is this: when you first start, actually you're not quite sure.
Exactly.
You're not quite sure, and you do not know. It's only when rubber hits the road, after you talk to a number of people, then you start to understand. Another thing you have to be aware of is the market. Singapore is not the market, right? Singapore is actually very small. You have to understand your market. Let's say is your market the Southeast Asia region, or your market are global, and you have to take that into account, right? And how you build your model.
Yeah. Would it be appropriate to use a football analogy? Depending on your opponent, and you're the manager, you want to be able to change the formation of your team, bring different types of defenders, midfielders, and strikers to play a different game, so that you can win.
Yeah, you do need to, but it's very hard, It's very hard. As a startup, first, the number of people you have is restricted, right? Limited, because
Yeah.
you don't have lots of money to hire so many people.
Yeah.
You have to start with a core team, right?
Yeah.
So very important is you need people with depth, and also you need people with breadth, so that you are agile, you are adaptable, right? Because if you are too locked in, and this is where people coming on research has a problem, right? It's a real issue, you know.
Yeah.
The people who do very well in research tend to be very, very deep.
Yeah.
Right, I'm super good at doing ABC, right? That's how I become world class in that.
Yeah.
If you are too narrow, you cannot adapt, you know.
Yeah.
So as you go out to the market, you need both depth and breadth.
Understand.
Yeah.
So there was some, I would say, internal tensions between the company's DNA, right? If it's research.
Yeah. So the people going up, because what's happened is I know SG Noe talks about deep tech and so on. Tech is good, right? Tech is good. Deep tech is good, but deep tech and tech, especially deep tech, has a certain business model. You are competing on the basis of deep tech, right? And then you have to build your business model around that deep tech, because now you have to solve the deep tech and you have to solve the business aspect, right?
Correct. Yeah. And actually, you would say they're both equally important.
Yes.
And one without the other, in a way, is insufficient for success.
Right. I think there are deep tech startups that actually, where I go out and say, really, I can do this tech better than anybody else. And there are actually some startups that just use tech, right? It doesn't need deep tech. But then those are different kind of startup. But as you go out to the market, you ask yourself, what do you want to be? And where do you want to position? And you have to build your team around that, right?
I like to give the listeners a bit of a raw bird's eye view from the trench. Can you comment about AI in your domain? Some of the challenging milestones that you've already achieved, and where are you pushing towards?
All right. Okay, let's talk about AI in the domain first, right? Yeah. When we started 5 years ago, it was very, very early. At that time, people start to hear of AI, but a lot of people do not believe. You know, a lot of people don't believe, hey, real or not, can or not, right? Is it only for very big companies, can or not?
Came across a bit like snake oil.
Right, is it true or not, right? So part of the challenge at that time is to convince people that it can work. But today, we got to a point whereby it's no longer about whether it can work or not. It's already clear enough, and there are enough examples that it can work across multiple domains and in multiple areas. And now the question is, can you deploy it well, right? Can you deploy it well? Because work means different things. Work can mean I can give you a result. But in industry, this is where there's a difference between industry and research. In research, say, can I find the best solution? Give me an optimization, can I find the best solution? In research, you can find the best solution compared to everyone, you're a winner, right? But in industry, you must find the best solution every time, right? A day and a day, and you cannot do so much preparation just to get a one result, right? So what works in research and what is required in industry, actually there's also a gap. And one must be fully aware of it, right? So a proof of one is not enough. It must be repeatable again and again. And I can integrate into my workflow and so on. Then you have a winner.
So it's a bit, one would be a master chef tart competition, and the other one would be a Michelin tart 3-star restaurant open 24 hours.
You have to do it again and again, and you have to do it in a way that's profitable, right?
Exactly.
Not in research, right? I can put all the resources in because I want to optimize the single thing. I show, look, I can find it, right? But you are in production. When you're in industry, different, you know. Every day you have to produce it, and produce it at a price that it makes sense to the company, right?
Would you like to comment a bit about some of the recent milestones that your company has made?
Right. There are many. I think, again, it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
I think if you look at our journey from the day where we first came out, we were bootstrapped, you know, no pay, you know, just support yourself. To where we are today. If you ask what's our journey, I can talk about things we do in marketing and things we do to get real sales and so on. Things we do for marketing would be, you know, how to get attention. You know, as a startup, you have to get attention and people hear you. So one of our tricks is participate in competitions and so on, and then try and get speaking slots where you get invited to be keynote speaker at some event organized by, say, some authority. Then you speak and people hear of you, right? So in terms of getting attention, we are very, very fortunate because the year we are formed in 2016 was also the year where Singapore FinTech Festival, the world's largest FinTech festival, was just started, right? So we said, hey, we got to get our name known. We participated in the Accelerator on the first year, and there were about 600 competitors at that time, and we are one of the 3 winners in the Accelerator, and that kind of put our mark. And with that, we secured our initial funding, right? And then we've been able to kind of win an award every year, right? And including the very latest, the Hong Kong FinTech Festival or Hong Kong FinTech Week. It's the largest one. I think Hong Kong and Singapore always compete, right? So they have a number of verticals. We are in the InsurTech vertical, about 200 players in that particular one. And we are number 1 in that, right? Because of that, now we get to the grand final, which is November, early November, right? So that's getting marketing. So that's how we get branding, and we also try and become keynote speaker. That's how you get visibility. The other one then is you need to have really customer wins. The customer wins are the one that will really open doors for you.
Would you like to comment a little bit about what your Smart Claims product is intending to achieve for the insurance sector?
Right.
Both insurers, hospitals, and even the less digitalized GPs and so forth.
Right.
And I think you have a vision over that, right? Which is about the which you call the Smart Claim Nexus project.
Right.
And maybe you would like to comment about how that could be strategically significant for Singapore.
Right. Okay. So I explained to you, a startup evolves over time, and we learn, right? So when we started, we were fortunate enough to find some insurance customers where we say, hey, I can apply AI to help you, right? And how do we help an insurance company? We help an insurance company in 3 ways. One of them is, how do I automate your process so that you become more efficient? Instead of needing 20, 30 people, maybe you only need half of the number of people, and your people that are free up can do higher value work. So use AI for automation. That's number 1. And primarily, we apply that for claims processing, right? You put in your documents, I'll tell you yes or no, right? Number 2 is everybody is worried about fraud, right? Because if there's fraud, a leakage, then it hits the bottom line. So and we know now, having seen over 10 million claims across the region and so on, we know now across different countries in the region, anywhere from 3 to 5% of claims can have some degree of fraud or over-servicing or overcharging, right? So if you can shine light on it, then people can take that out. You can reduce the cost for people. So the second thing we do is we call fraud detection, so that you control leakage. And the third one is area of how do you get more money, right? All companies interest how to get more revenue, right? And more revenue means how do you upsell, cross-sell, how do you understand your customer? So essentially we use our solution to provide these 3 kind of AI to provide solutions to this kind of thing. So we've been doing that, what's called enterprise solution. That means I deliver to an insurer. And recently, I've been working with IMDA on this thing called Claims Nexus, right? On Claims Nexus. Claims Nexus is to take this stack of solutions that we have and try and put it onto a hub, right? And with that hub, I can connect up the ecosystem in Singapore, the providers on one side, the insurers on the other. And what it does is this, right? If you are an insurer, you have to connect to maybe 3,000 to 5,000 providers in the country, right? Wow, hassle, huh? And if you are a provider, you might have to connect to one of 10, 15 insurer in the region, because you do not know, right? Your patient walking in could be from any insurer, right? But by connecting to the hub takes care of all this routing. We call this the routing, right? One-to-many connection. But that's the most lowest level thing that we try to do. The next level thing we try to do is this. We pull information out from all these bills and put them into what's called electronic machine readable form, JSON. Right? Next level we do is then we can look at the bill and then we say, hey, is there something wrong with this, right? So we flag it for you and say, hey, something wrong. This claim seems this part is wrong, maybe too high, or when this kind of disease, you don't normally have this kind of medicine, that kind of thing. So we'll flag whether a claim is unusual, I got some treatment. The next thing we do is I can even process for you and say, hey, this claim you can accept it already. Immediately imagine you send and get a response. Today, it can be days, before you get a response, right? So we think of a range of services on a hub as a stack of service. I can route for you. I can extract for you. I can make a decision for you. I can detect whether it's a fraud or not. And actually, there are other layers sitting on top of this that we can do. We can do factoring and other services.
Understand. I suppose IMDA is working with you to try and get these solutions out to all the GPs as well.
Absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely.
And that,
I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to digitize the ecosystem and will help the productivity of all our SME providers as well, right? Yeah.
if you were to, in hindsight again, I mean, because 5 years is actually quite a long time in a startup's journey. What would your perspective be about in terms of how companies and government, in a way, have aided in your journey,
Right.
and in particular for AI in the space? You think what else do you think can be
Right.
more we can do?
Right. Okay. This is part of what maybe perhaps talk about how government can help high-tech companies, high-tech startup to create a fantastic company out of Singapore and that kind of thing, which
Yeah.
what we are trying very hard to do. I think you can look at many layers, right? There are a few layers. First, I must thank IMDA lah. It has helped me a lot, right? But there are more you can do, right? It helped me a lot, right? How have I benefited from IMDA's support, right? For example, Claims Nexus to us is really linchpin, you know. If we make Claims Nexus work, we'll put Singapore on the map and actually take AiDA into a different level completely, right? I'm very glad we are getting this support from IMDA. We're also getting support from what's called the MRA, right? Market readiness assessment. I mean, go to new markets and so on. Actually, all those are super necessary, especially for a young startup. You know, don't have a lot of resources. All that helps a lot, right? Okay, I would call that tactical. So I want to try and answer your question. What can government do for high tech startup? I want to answer at two levels, right? One level, a higher level, then a next level, a bit more tactical, right? A higher level is this. Because I've been in the system for 15 years, so I see. Government has invested so much in R&D. You look at your RIE plans since I think 1991, and we are putting consistently maybe about 1% or more percent of resources into R&D. I would say we need to take a view, a balance. That investment is what I call planting. Investment in research is planting. You are planting with a view to grow something. Question is, who is harvesting, right? How are you harvesting? I think just as much thinking need to be done on the harvesting aspect than the planting. If you look at how large MNC do, right? You just look at MNC's allocation of resources from their R&D to advanced development, sales and marketing, production, and so on. There is a certain distribution, you know. I think today we are doing a lot in the front end. We need to do much more on the back end. And the back end, it can consume just as much resources.
Probably more, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm just being gentle, right? Yeah, just being gentle. But it's just as important, right? Just as important, right? Because you don't have that, whatever you plant, who is harvesting?
Right.
Yeah. So that's a macro aspect, I would say. Another aspect I would say is this. There are many models around the world. And actually, you can learn from successes, you can learn from failure. Right? Again, we don't need to reinvent everything ourselves. Everybody looks at Valley. Valley is super successful, right? Valley keep coming up with semiconductor, then internet, then biotech, so many things, right? Okay, Valley is fantastic, but Valley has got to a point where the ecosystem is now self-sustaining, right?
It's a certain velocity and maturity.
Right. And we need to get ourselves up to some stage, right? You cannot be like the Valley, just like that, right? You need to put a few. But is it possible? Yes, it's possible. We've seen it happen. Just look at China's ecosystem. Came from nowhere. Today, I would say, hey, you know, it's getting really serious, and I think they will now push out this startup ecosystem. Right? Question is, what have they done that's different that permit them to do that? I point also to another country whereby technically it's fantastic. I point to England, for example, the UK, right? The UK got world-class universities, the Cambridge, the Oxford, Imperial, and what. Great technology, great skill. But where are the startups that are going to world scale? Not so many, you know.
Not as many, relatively, yes.
Not as many. But there is lesson there, right? And look at Israel. There are also lessons there, right? So my point is it's more than just funding research. It's funding research and thinking of how the research is going to go out and what you want to grow. Right. A problem for us is when we think grow, we always think MNC. How do I attract them here? I think it's a different game now, right? I think it's a different game. We should do what we are doing. Attract them here is good, But Accredited here is not about growing your startup ecosystem.
Understand.
Growing a startup ecosystem requires a different thinking, and I think the balance is not right. Now, I'm speaking as a startup guy. My complaint is that I think the balance is not right.
Maybe on a final parting note, if you had maybe just one piece of sage advice for any startup CTO or CEO, what would that be?
I think you need to build a good team. I think you need to have that drive, okay? Because it is a huge journey. It's not like I go out, you'll be successful. It's really like you go out there, you're into a big ocean. You need a strong team of people with you, and the team of people need to be, gel, because it is a tough journey, right? But it's a challenging journey, right? It's ever tougher because I think our ecosystem is not so mature. I think if I transplanted AiDA in the valley, I think my journey will be different also. Because people can recognize and accept it, right? Yeah. Whereas here, I think our ecosystem not so mature. Our VCs are not so generous, or not able to be so generous. So the journey is a little bit harder.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Right.
Really good to have that face-to-face conversation.
You're welcome. I hope I shared some insights that are useful for your audience. Right?
Yeah, I think certainly I enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
You have an audience of one.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you find it useful.
Yes. Thank you.